Welcome, everyone, to Buddhist Center. It's wonderful to be here tonight. Let's set our motivation right from the start, which is the Mahayana motivation, the most excellent motivation in the universe, and that's bodhicitta, the wish to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And last week, when we talked about this incredible mind, bodhicitta, the wish to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, we said that there are two specific things that are going on when we say this statement. There's an object of attainment, which is the actual Buddhahood, which we seek, which we're trying to achieve. But then there's the intended objective. Why are we trying to achieve this enlightened state? Why do we want to become a Buddha? Why do we want to have this state of perfection? It's this the reason for this, the intention behind this goal that we have is to be able to be of benefit to all sentient beings. And we know that the Buddha has eliminated all faults and only has excellent qualities, is the most reliable guide in the universe, and transformed into that state by removing the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. So not only is he have incredible, or she have incredible compassion to take care of all of us, but there's also this state where there isn't any fear, where there aren't any obstructions, there aren't any things that the Buddha doesn't know how to fix in terms of how to help us ripen, how to help us discover our own goal. There isn't anything that the Buddha is missing in terms of that. So we come to this conclusion when we study about what a Buddha is and what a Buddha can do. And when we study what this state of enlightenment is like, where there's been this removal of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience, we come to find out that this is the only state that makes any sense for us to try to achieve, because it's the highest state achievable. Our mind can achieve the highest state, and it's the only state where we become the most reliable guide in the universe. And we're reliable because we have these qualities of perfection that no other being in the universe has. So when we say, I want to become a Buddha, it's attaining this state where there's no afflictive obstructions or obstructions to omniscience, where we have perfect love and perfect skillful means and power and perfect wisdom. But it's doing so for the sake of, for a really specific purpose. And that's because we've been led to the conclusion that our aim is to help all sentient beings discover what we've learned about cyclic existence and how to free themselves from suffering. And we want to be part of that process of freeing them from suffering and bringing them to the highest amount of happiness possible. And our discovery in this process is that we have to become a Buddha in order to do so. And this is why we've been going over every week the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. And then we will go over the equalizing, exchanging self with others practice. So we can convince ourselves, so we can come to the conclusion that it only makes sense to become a Buddha. We come to this conclusion because this is how we fulfill our needs completely and all sentient beings' needs completely. And we aren't able to fulfill our desire to have the highest amount of happiness possible without becoming a Buddha. So when we look at the teachings shared in common with beings of small and medium capacity, we've really decided that we want out. We want to, we want to achieve something for ourselves. And we come to find out that when we start to study the Mahayana practices and the Mahayana path, if we've been only studying the individual liberation vehicle teachings, if we've only studied up, through the medium scope, we come to discover that in order to achieve our own fullest potential, we have to become a Buddha. And this is something that we learn about in the beginning, and then we come to this conclusion through the process of generating a real mind that aspires to enlightenment, not just kind of an idea about it. Through the process of, going over the steps that we've been talking about, such as the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, we find out that to achieve our highest aims, to achieve our highest abilities, It's contingent on us changing our mind from a mind that cherishes ourselves day and night more than others to a mind that cherishes everyone else day and night and puts others' needs before our own. And this sounds crazy when you first say it out loud, that the way that you can be happy is by putting others' needs before your own. And in worldly standards, this makes no sense whatsoever. So just look at our mind's natural reaction to this idea that my way to happiness is by somehow putting your need for happiness and your need to be free from suffering in front of my own and focusing on that. Somehow this becomes my way to the bliss. And we normally don't think like this. We normally think that our way to bliss is to cherish ourselves more than others and to accumulate as many things as possible and to rely upon external factors to make us happy, so that we can personally have the highest amount of happiness. But it fails us over and over again. And we see it fail those around us over and over again. So we see that if our objective was to really, really be happy, and we saw those around us really achieving that goal of complete satisfaction and, the fullest amount of happiness day and night by another way, then it would make sense for us to do that. But we see that the most happy people that we come in contact with, or the most happy people that I can say I've come in contact with, were those people who started to learn this process the same way that we're learning this process, and then transform their minds slowly, just like we are going to transform our minds slowly. And then, got to wherever they are at on the path. I can't speak about others' realizations. I don't know anyone else's minds but mine. But I could, just as a witness to some of these beings like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and other beings in history and beings like Namgyal Khensur Geshe Wangdak Rinpoche, I can really see that there is a sense of satisfaction and a sense of happiness there in terms of Namgyal Khensur Geshe Wangdak Rinpoche in a really up close and personal way, day after day after day, when he was in the sickest state of his life, the end of his life, sickest state of his life in terms of physical health, and being able to see a sense of joy and see a sense of bliss that didn't seem to leave no matter what the external circumstances were. And this was just a real clue over and over and over again to me as to what I should do, because I know that my teacher told me that he practiced these things his entire life, and practiced the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment and equalizing and exchanging self with others his entire life. And I was able to see, and Lorinda was able to see the fruit of that practice, the display of what that practice manifests. And it was very different than what I've seen others at end of life or seen others in older age have in terms of acceptance and have in terms of appreciation for every moment still. I haven't seen that in others who hadn't worked on their minds or hadn't matured their minds or hadn't done some work on themselves. So it was the clue. It's over and over, for 25 years, looking at Rinpoche and seeing him just such an even flow of practice and an even flow of love and compassion, saying that, okay, this is what I've witnessed, and if I want to have this same affect, if I want to be able to confront life's difficulties in the same way that I've been able to witness my teacher confront life's difficulties, then it's necessary for me to engage in the things that he did in order to be able to deal with the most difficult things we will all ever have to deal with. And I know from an on-paper physical perspective that there was no way that someone in that state should be able to smile and be happy all of the time. But I witnessed that, and I witnessed it again, as I said, day after day after day after day. And I witnessed this being who was incredibly sick, and as I said, incredibly ill on dialysis, 13 hours a day in our home that I was administering, always looking at me like, what can I do for you? How can I help you? I care for you. My main objective of this day is to help you move forward on your path. And this is all I ever felt from him in the beginning of our relationship in the late 90s. And this is the same thing that I felt from him when he was much, much less physically able and then not able at all at the end of his life. And this caring and putting my needs before his needs, this feeling that that was really going on, was always there and never left, even in the hardest times that he had. And I think that, we can go to a lot of teachings and we can hear a lot of information, but these real life experiences that we can have with these living, incredibly realized beings, we can say bodhisattvas or we can say Buddhas. Again, I don't know someone else's mind. I look at my teacher as a Buddha. But that's my personal preference. But we have these beings in our world, and sometimes just witnessing someone like that is enough to convince us more than a whole bunch of pages in a book. But the trick is that it convinces us that we then need to go read a bunch of pages in a book, because that's what our teachers did. Our teachers got the information, got the correct information, and then made sure that they analyzed the correct information, and then it became part of their meditation, part of who they were. But it didn't come about through just seeing someone good. And our realizations won't come about from just witnessing greatness, like seeing His Holiness the Dalai Lama. As Jetsun Milarepa said, as I mentioned before, that we can't just look at food, we have to eat it. We can't just hear a teaching, we have to practice it. But it's crucial for us to hear the correct information. But when we have a living example of what the correct information can do, it's really encouraging for us to know that, oh, okay, we have a role model, and this role model is showing us exactly what we need to do. They're role modeling how we should behave if we want the results that they have. And it's such a beautiful process. And I encourage all of you to seek out teachers like the great master Geshe Tabke Rinpoche, who's still in our world at 97 years old, I think, teaching Arya Nagarjuna's Precious Garland now once a week on Mondays. You can see this magnificent teaching going on. It's on YouTube on Shavasti Abbey's website. And Geshe Tabke Rinpoche is here in the United States, in Drepung Losaling in Texas, just incredibly realized master in our world. And Geshe Dorje Damdula Rinpoche, Tibet House, we can always receive teachings from him, and they administer so many incredible programs at the Tibet House in New Delhi, the NIC and NCC and NDC and NMC, all of these different levels of certificate programs that you can take and learn from this very realized master, Geshe Dorje Damdul Rinpoche, and other teachers that you have access to and meet with, Genpo Drapa Rinpoche in Drepung, and so many other masters. Again, as I said, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I'm just speaking of teachers that I've been in presence of: Geshe Lobsang Gonpo Rinpoche, Khensur Geshe Wangdak Rinpoche, Demolocha Rinpoche, Khensur Lobsang Gyatso Rinpoche. These beings who convinced me by their actions and behaviors, and by me watching. Because anyone who knows me, I check everything. I'm watching. Even if doesn't seem like I'm paying attention, I'm watching very intently. And I saw this very commonality between these incredible masters, and that was that they had something that I wanted. They had something to offer that I wanted. So let's try to set our motivation of this beautiful mind of bodhicitta that, says, I want to become a Buddha, the object of attainment for the sake of all sentient beings, the intended objective. I'm here tonight at this teaching to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And with this thought, let's imagine all of the holy beings in the merit field who've, done these things just like us in a contrived way, said these things we don't really feel. May I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, everyone. I have no bias left. I look at any being, even difficult ones, and that's my first thought. I need to become a Buddha for you. Most of us, this isn't real. We're trying to, in a contrived way at first, it's a facsimile, and if it's fake, it's fine. This is how it starts with just the words, and allow the words to flow. And those words will eventually, if you couple it with the actual practices, if you don't do the meditation, there's no chance that there'll be anything more than words. And we'll read about this in Lama Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chenmo tonight, where it talks about, like, we have to start with words. But if we don't kind of couple that with an understanding of what the words mean, and so forth, we're not going to really get anywhere. And if we don't meditate on these stages, we're not going to have an effective state. We're not going to have a change in our mind where it starts to work in the way that these texts say our minds should work. We won't have our mind actually spontaneously want to become a Buddha for everyone unless we practice the 7-point cause and effect, and the equalizing, exchanging, or the equalizing, exchanging self with others practice. It won't happen. We can say it over and over and over and over and over again as many times as possible. But if we don't actually engage in the practices, it's not going to move from a contrived state to an uncontrived, spontaneous state. But these Buddhas that we consider, and these holy beings that we're going to consider in the space in front of us, these role models, started exactly where we are, saying, okay, yeah, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. That guy that really, or that gal that gave me a hard time today, yeah, I'm going to make it my life's work and all my life's work to make sure I achieve some sort of state to help them. Is this the first thing you think when someone's cut you off or yelling at you or giving you a hard time, or you think they've cheated you in some way? Is this the first thing you think? It's not what we usually think. So we work on it. We say it, and then we work on our practice. And we will notice, if we're actually practicing, we're actually meditating, that as we're saying the words, they're going to have more of a feeling, week after week, month, year after year, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, 30 years now. I can speak on that. And I can say that because I do actually engage in these practices I talk about, I don't have bodhicitta, or I haven't realized these steps, but I do practice these steps. I think that if you really shouldn't sit and talk about things and tell people about these great, lovely things if they're not something that you do and that you've discovered for yourself means something of value. I guess some people find like a living out of talking like this or something, but I'm certainly not interested in that in any way whatsoever, shape or form whatsoever. I'm interested because Rinpoche asked me to share these teachings with you, and I found them valuable in my own meditation in life. I'm interested in sharing them with you, and sharing with you what I practice and why I found it valuable. So yeah, I think it's important, if we look at our minds on a regular basis, it's important that we do get encouraged by progress, but don't have unrealistic goals in terms of progress. We'll see our natural instincts start to flow up and be able to be quelled quicker and quicker and quicker as we become more engaged in these practices. I'm not saying that I've in some way mastered not erupting, but if you do engage in these practices, we have a whole lot of information to be able to utilize while we're trying to remain like a piece of wood and not react when something kind of negative is coming at us. That wood-like state where we're not moving and not reacting gives us a moment to look at some of these things that we're learning about and engage in the analysis that we are engaging in, that will help us then to have a reaction that's more realistic. It will allow us to come from a place of wisdom instead of a place that's just mixed with all of this anger. And we know that when we have anger and then we're making decisions out of anger, no good decisions are made. You know, we shouldn't make some brash decisions when we're too angry or too happy, they say. You know, we shouldn't, you know, commit to things. We should be really careful with these kind of exaggerated states that we're in. So we really, we want to try to practice this stuff so that our minds have information in them that's different than what we normally have in them, that because what we normally have in them causes us to just snowball emotionally out of control. And this information, this new information that we're trying to put in our mind, allows our mind to actually not snowball out of control and be as effective in that moment as possible. So we talk about these grand goals of liberation and Buddhahood, but if we look at just our day and how much easier our day would be if every single time there was something coming up, even on the TV, when we want to say, what the heck is that guy talking about? If we could just, even as we see our mind starting to do that, say, okay, calm down, maybe do some breathing, meditation, get it to a more realistic place, and then say, okay, what am I really looking at? What am I really perturbed about? I seem to be perturbed about afflictions that are manifesting. Why am I so perturbed at a person? That person isn't the afflictions. It allows us to have a space to start to make more sense out of what's going on and see the cause and effect that's going on, and see like the potential for us to react in a bad way that will leave bad imprints in our mind and create a more worse situation going on, and then make this person feel bad. Or, you know, what makes the most sense in this moment that I've taken where I'm remaining like a piece of wood? What makes the most sense in this circumstance? And, you know, when we have this information, we can make decisions from a place of wisdom instead of an irrational standpoint. And, you know, the bodhisattvas get better and better and better at it, to the point where they just see, you know, the afflictions manifesting in behaviors and feel so bad that someone's under that control. Someone's just under that control. Imagine if we could just really believe that and see that, just immediately seeing someone, oh, they're just under control of an evil dictator of self-grasping ignorance. The poor thing, the poor dear. Look at them acting just so panicked. Look at them acting so angrily. Look, that person took care of me in my previous life and was so kind to me, and they're so out of control right now because they don't know any better. They're under the sway of this thing that I get under the sway of too. How nice it would be if we could both not be under the sway of this. We're equally important. You see how these teachings allow you to start to make sense out of interactions with beings that aren't always so easy to interact with. And then when we have excessive attachment, we can also look at the other way in terms of other types of relationships that we've had with this being that aren't the way that we have them right now, and that we won't have them this way in the future. And it's like the whole thing will get shaken up and will get poured out, and there will be all kinds of different things going on than there are going on now after we die. And when we start to meditate upon the things that the Buddha told us we need to meditate upon, that things are impermanent and that things are suffering and that things are impure and that things are selfless, when we start to have this arsenal, to have self-defense, because that's really what we're doing. We're going to war on our afflictions. We're trying to defend ourselves against this grasping ignorance. So we have this self-cherishing attitude, we have this self-grasping ignorance, and we need to really to go to war on that. We need to defend ourselves from that. And it's not always fun, but if we have the correct information, then it will be a successful battle and we will win. But no battle that anyone goes into is fun, as it says in Master Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. So yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about really the day-to-day benefits of the practice, and seeing some inspiration in our teachers and seeing the difference between ourselves and our teachers, and knowing that our teachers didn't magically just end up that way, and knowing our teachers are spending day and night trying to teach us stuff because they know that they have this happiness in them that we don't, and they want us to be happy and be free from suffering. And when we start to know this about the teachers, and we find the teachers like this, there's so many in this world, find teachers that cherish others more than themselves, then it really, really can change how motivated we are. So imagine those kind of beings in the space in front of you. All the holy enlightened beings, Buddha Shakyamuni, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Chen Rezig in person, Lord Kalachakra in person. We're so fortunate to have him in this world. And Namgyal Khensur Geshe Wangdak, Rinpoche, Geshe Lobsang, Gonpo Rinpoche, all these enlightened masters, these holy beings that come in our world and evolve and or are already evolved and show us exactly how to evolve based on their own personal discoveries. So imagining them in the space in front of us, profound view lineage, extensive deeds lineage, lineage of blessings, Nima, Kaju, Sakya, Galup, all the highest yoga tantra, performance tantra, action tantra, perfecter deities, 35 Buddhas, all the holy beings in the space in front of you that you can imagine serving as our role models. And now imagine that you said, I want to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings at the beginning of this teaching, even if it's in a contrived way. Now, even if it's in a contrived way, imagine that you invite all of those sentient beings, beginning with friends and then neutrals and then difficult people or enemies, and invite them here to lead them in these prayers, lead them here to hear these teachings. Imagine that they can hear this teaching in their own individual languages, at their own individual aptitudes. Imagine that all of their sufferings are quelled for the moment during this teaching, and that they're able to really, really focus on what's important, focus on taking the essence of life, and that is actually engaging in the practice of shared in common with beings of three, the practice for beings of three capacities. Imagine that they've come to this conclusion for the time being that you've brought them here, that this is what really matters, and that everything else they're just going to discard for the time being. Just like winnowing husk, as it says in Lama Tsongkhapa's texts. Imagine that they're just only here for the essence. We're only here for, the grain. We're not here for the husk. We're here for the essence of what it is. And, we know that when they're, I guess, dealing with grains, they have to get the husk off somehow. So there's a process called winnowing. And Geshe Rinpoche Rinpoche was talking about this at the teaching on Arya Nagarju's Precious Garland. And in Lama Tsongkhapa's Song of Spiritual Experience, it talks about worldly concerns. We should look at them like the husk, get rid of them. You separate the husk from the grain, and what's left is the essence. What's left is what you can eat. What's left is what's, important. The husk isn't meaningful. It's not something that you can use. Likewise, all of the negativities, all of the things that, we normally are involved with, and that beings in these various realms are involved with, are really just the husk. Are dealing with the husk, and and dealing with the things that won't cause real happiness or freedom from suffering. So imagine that all the beings are brought here and are really, we say we bring the hell beings here. Imagine that they're heat and they're cold, just to shut off for the time being, and they can just listen. And imagine that the hungry ghosts are brought here, and that their hunger and thirst are just cut off for just the moment. There's these beings in these realms, whether you believe it or not, that are experiencing torment and suffering higher than we could ever imagine. So just imagine the highest amount of heat you could ever imagine, and multiply it times 1,000,000,000 or 1,000,000,000. The cold, 1,000,000,000 or 1,000,000,000 multiplied. Just this occasional sufferings that could be the worst thing that you could ever imagine, times 1,000,000,000. Going on in other places, and hunger and thirst going on in other places, worse than the things that we could imagine where hunger and thirst are going on in our world. Imagine it 1,000,000,000 times worse. There's beings who are experiencing this And animals we can see with our own eyes. They're, made to be brought to slaughter. They're eaten by us. They're used by us. They're used for work by us. And if they aren't captured and used by the arrogant human beings as workers and as food and as, like they're not even beings. They're just like we just can use them and they don't matter. Not only that, but then they have to live in fear, and their fear of being eaten by a larger animal, fear of not finding food, fear of not finding shelter. And all of these circulate are happening when they're trying to find shelter. When they're trying to find shelter and they're trying to find food, they're always looking over their shoulder. Even when they're defecating, they're going somewhere quiet to make sure they don't get eaten. Imagine that. Every time you went to the toilet, you had to worry about being eaten. This is the kind of life we can live if we don't listen to what the Buddha came to tell us about. Abandon evil, subdue your mind and engage in perfect virtuous qualities. This is the teaching of the Buddha. These are the things we can look forward to. What we're trying to poop, and also at the same time worried that we're going to be eaten. We don't have to go deeper than the animal realm to think about a suffering that we couldn't even imagine. And then the human realm, all of the sufferings we can see going on in the human realm. And then the demigods realm and the gods realm, the demigods realm. And we can read all about the jealousies and so forth, and the gods realm and the desires, and the form and formless realm, where there's at least the pervasive compounded suffering in the fourth concentration level of the form realm, and up through all the formless realm concentrations, we see that at least there's the pervasive compounded suffering. So the reason I'm mentioning all of this is we know that samsara is just plagued with suffering, and we know that while you're suffering, while you're engaged in manifest suffering, or you're having too much bliss and happiness, you're not really able to pay attention to anything other than one of that extreme one way or another. So we're imagining that these beings are here, and everything is either tuned down in terms of bliss in the gods realms and so forth, and some of the human existences, and turned down in terms of suffering in terms of the lower realms and so forth, as we invite them all here, because we're really trying to imagine that we're benefiting them, completely benefiting them, and that we're inviting them here, and somehow this blessing of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is allowing their own magnificent potential to transform. And this is all that the Buddhas can do, is show us how to transform what we have that can be transformed. We have this mind that can be transformed, and the Buddhas show up, and these holy beings like our teachers show up just to say, hey, this is how you do it. So we're going to imagine that we've brought all of these beings here, and that they're here to listen, and that they're staring into the eyes of all these holy beings and witnessing this kind of love and compassion, witnessing the kind of being that I mentioned before when I mentioned being around and being so close to Namgyal Khensur Geshe Wangdak Rinpoche. Imagine that they're experiencing the kind of feeling that I tried to convey to you, that I've felt being in the presence of such a qualified master for 25 years. Imagine that you and everyone else is feeling that kind of safety that these kind of beings provide us emotionally when we're around them. This feeling and this sense of caring, the sense of kindness that they have for us, that really just radiates from them. And know that we will have that. Know that we will be exactly like them when we do exactly what they did. So we bring all of these beings here. We have all the enlightened beings in front of us. And now imagine that the space in front of us transforms into Rajagriha Vulture Peak Mountain, and we'll recite the Heart Sutra, where we know that the Buddha meant what he said, that things are all empty of intrinsic existence, that there's nothing in the universe that has intrinsic existence, that everything has a mode of being that we don't know about. We think things exist from their own side, right within the object, established by way of their own character. We can learn what all of this means. We're not going to get into it right now, but we think that things have a mode of existence, exist in a way, and they even appear in a way to us in a way that's incorrect. And the Buddha came to tell us that. The Buddha didn't come to tell us that things don't exist. The Buddha didn't come to tell us you don't exist. The Buddha didn't come to tell me I don't exist. This is a very large misconception that is spread around Buddhism, and is spread around Buddhism by people who don't know what selflessness means. Selflessness does not mean the self is empty of self. That means that the self is empty of intrinsic existence. The self of person and self of phenomena are not empty of themselves, because that would mean that they don't exist. They're empty of a specific mode of existence. That's inherent existence. They're empty of that. Inherent existence doesn't exist. Existence from its own side doesn't exist, but subjective existence does exist. And this is what we have to come to learn about dependent origination through mere imputation. We have to come to learn about the three levels of dependent origination, of results being dependent upon causes, wholes being dependent upon parts, and then this, things being dependent on mere imputation. So we'll come to learn what that means, but we will never come to learn that the Buddha came to tell us that things don't exist. We will come to learn that the Buddha came to tell us that intrinsic existence doesn't exist, and things that intrinsically exist don't exist, and that there is not even a mind, a Buddha, Four Noble Truths, or a banjo that intrinsically exists. But the Buddha says that in terms of conventional truth, the mind, the Buddha, the banjos, oak trees, all of these things conventionally exist. This is a truth for a concealer. So these aren't things that we say don't exist. We're saying that they don't exist, and the Buddha's saying they don't exist in the way that we think that they do. So the way that they do exist is something that I've been personally trying to unravel for 30 years now, and personally trying to find, what it means to me about that things don't intrinsically exist, how I feel versus how things actually are. There's a discrepancy there. And how can I harmonize the fact that I'm talking with you, but I'm talking with you as an entity that is not intrinsically existent? How can I harmonize that without losing everything? And a lot of times, folks talking about Buddhism lose everything because they really don't know how to talk about this very fine line called the middle that you have to walk, where there's not an extreme of absolutism or an extreme of nihilism. And if you tell me that self is empty of self, that's an extreme of nihilism. If you tell me that self is empty of existence, self doesn't exist, that's nihilism. But if you tell me that the self has some sort of concrete substance, then that's absolutism. So I need to find something in the middle there. And that's what the Buddha came to tell us about. Arya Nagarjuna found and retrieved these Perfection of Wisdom sutras and came to explain to us. And Acharya Buddhapalita and Acharya Shantideva and Acharya Chandrakirti came to explain to us this very, very fine line that we have to stay on if we're not going to fall to an extreme of absolutism or an extreme of nihilism. And this is something you have to constantly check in your meditation. When you're meditating upon emptiness, are you meditating on the correct object of negation? The object of negation is intrinsic existence. The object of negation of pot isn't pot, it's intrinsic existence. When we look at pots, we talk about pots a lot in Buddhism. It's that which is, bulbous, flat-bottomed, and capable of performing the function of holding some water or something. Those things, when we look at those things aren't empty of themselves. Meaning, like, I'm going to somehow meditate and find out that this thing doesn't flat and bulbous and capable of holding water. And that's asinine. That's not what you're going to come to find out. Because then you have to, when you come out of ultimate analysis, then you still have this thing in your hand or on the table that performs that function. And this is the middle. This is the thing that if you can figure out, according to Buddha, what this means, what this fine line is, your mind will be at peace. Nirvana is peace. Nirvana is real. What you're actually, you're perceiving something unveiled. And we know that we can't say that things don't exist because the Buddha, who's omniscient, perceived things. The Buddha who's omniscient can come help me. The Buddha who's omniscient can give me a drink of water in a pot that's flat, bulbous, and capable of holding water. So we have to find out how we can have compassion for sentient beings, but also realize that ourselves and this compassion and the sentient beings are empty of intrinsic existence, and have it somehow make sense that this emptiness of intrinsic existence makes it possible for all of this to work, makes it possible for sentient beings to be objects of my compassion. This emptiness makes it possible for me to have compassion. This emptiness makes it possible for the compassion to even exist. And this is what we come to find out. Emptiness is the meaning of dependent origination. Dependent origination is the middle way. Therefore, emptiness is the middle way. This is what we have to come to understand. We start with emptiness. What is the meaning of emptiness? Emptiness means that things are empty of independent existence. It means nothing is independent. It means that things are dependent. It means that things dependently originate. If they're not independent, they're empty of independence. If something's empty of independence, right? So we're saying it's empty of being independent from its own side. If it's empty of independence, then it must be dependent. These things aren't synonymous because one's a positive phenomena and one's a negative phenomena. But somehow or another, we need to not only find out how we, part of finding out how we walk this line means that we somehow can solve this puzzle, that emptiness is the meaning of dependent origination. And I, said some clues in a rough way about, emptiness. What does emptiness mean? Emptiness of independent existence. Nothing exists independently. It means that things are dependent. It means that everything dependently originates. So we can see that how you can come to this idea of holding things together while being empty of intrinsic existence. Emptiness does not mean things don't exist. I think you get it. My main point is that hoping that folks, because I've heard on so many applications that there's no self, we've got nothing to worry about. There's no one to be sad here. There's no one to be happy here. That's be way too simple. That's not the point that's being made. There's not a one over here that exists the way that the one over here thinks that he exists, that is happy, and a happiness that exists the way that this guy over here that doesn't exist the way he thinks that he exists experiences a happiness that doesn't exist the way that he thinks it exists. But there is a guy here and there is a happiness. Just the guy and the happiness don't exist the way that I think that they exist, but they do exist in a mode which is dependent origination. And if it's a mode of dependent origination, it means that the guy here that's talking is empty of intrinsic existence, because my mode of existence is dependent origination. So that's some fun puzzling. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Again, imagining that the entire merit field is transformed into Rajagriha of Ultra Peak Mountain, where Buddha Shakyamuni has blessed Lord Chenrezig and Venerable Shariputra, and this blessing has caused them to put on this play of the Heart Sutra, where the ultimate meaning of reality is presented, that things lack intrinsic existence, and then hidden within it, the path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing, path of meditation, and path of no more learning are presented. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha, monks and a great gathering of the Sangha, bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. And at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita should see in this way. Seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature, form is emptiness. Emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form. Form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity, no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation. No consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye, dot two, up to no mind, dot two, no dot two of dharmas, no mind consciousness, dot two, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of Prajaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra, Prajaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as truth, since there is no deception. Prajaparamita mantra is said in this way: Te Adom Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhisoha. The Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Buddhi Soha. 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 Ah. Kala ju bene jo tamba ne ngushe du ju nga yi du do jen ju ba ba la ma yi bu shin zi ni zung gan do zo la sha ze lo aga zamara da jandara zamara ebe aga zamara da jandara zamara ebe aga zamara jandara aga zamara da jandara zamara ebe aga zamara Aga zamara jajandara zamaraya vede adon gate gate baragate barazangate bodhi zoha baba ganja sanji ga hede medoji je labadoji mebadoji shewadoji jagi baji medo beja danji jedin ga ye zoha gerindo jaji jewadan midun beja nandra wadan tumba junjin bonzon zojoji daji de jandan de le jo. Make an outer mandala offering as a request for the teaching. Remember thinking about making this offering of a perfect universe to the teacher, but then also making sure that you're thinking of the lineage that goes all the way back to Buddha Shakyamuni, because I can assure you that this lineage goes all the way back to Buddha Shakyamuni. From my teachers, 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 teachers. I don't know how many teachers I have to say, but eventually you end up at Buddha Shakyamuni through these various beautiful lineages of the, the Nyingma Sakya Kaju and Galup lineages, and then we look at the Nalanda lineages and the Profound View lineage, the Extensive Deeds lineage, lineage of blessings, and we make our ways. Our spiritual family make our way all the way to Buddha Shakyamuni. So when we make this mandala offering of this perfect universe, we're imagining this kind of lineage. We're imagining the teacher. I'm sitting here talking to you. So you're making a mandala offering, to the teacher. But really what you're thinking about is that I'm merely repeating what my teacher said and what his teacher and her teacher and his teacher and her teacher and his teacher and her teacher, however the lineage was, right? We can say there are these possibilities, and when we see all the yogis and yoginis that are all parts, the male and female yogis and yoginis that are all parts of this incredible lineage that we are part of, and had to be part of our kind of spiritual family as we go back in time. We know this is true. So we're so fortunate that even Lama Tsongkhapa said that there's no emptiness to realize other than the one that the Jetsun Milarepa realized, the great yogi Jetsun Milarepa. So we think about these incredible beings, that are all part of this process when we make this mandala offering. We always want to get as much of a large virtuous imprint as possible within our mind that will connect to as much as possible in the future so that we're never separated from these teachings. And the more and more real we can make it, and the more and more reasons we can give ourselves for doing it, and for really, really thinking about it in a deep way, the more impact it will actually have on our minds. And when something has an impact on our mind, it makes us feel a way that we want to make that impact happen again and again and again. So we're trying to be able to get to a place where it's just our goal to always have, an impact, because we discovered the value of that kind of impact. And as Guntan Dembe Drome says, that may I figure out a way to put a virtuous imprint in my mind every moment. And if we think about, may I figure out how to make like that like an atomic bomb against negativity kind of imprint, like the biggest one possible. If we're going to take the time to do these practices, if we're really going to take, time out of our, suffering of change to do something positive, we might as well make it as impactful as possible. And that's what I really want to convey at these teachings. Sometimes I may, go into a lot of detail about something very small. But I think that that's what Lama Tsongkhapa has instructed us to do, is not be satisfied with partial instructions and to know the details about everything, even the smallest thing. Because like I said, while we're remaining like a piece of wood and trying to figure out how to react when we're in a really hard situation, whatever that hard situation is, we need some ammunition. We need some facts that we can use to click our mind into a place where we can be the most effective. So that's why we're doing what we're doing, and trying to make these practices have the kind of impact while we're in a state of non-insanity, so that when we start to get insane, we can stop the insanity before it goes out of control and the inappropriate attention snowballs us. We can hopefully, as we start to see the inappropriate attention quelling up in our minds, we can then remain like a piece of wood and apply the antidotes and say, this is making sense. Are things as exaggerated as I really think that they are? What's really going on here? And then apply the various antidotes to whatever's going on, whatever the disturbance is. Is it to think about impermanence? Is it to think about that this, anything that's really happiness and the samsara is really suffering? Is it going to make sense for me to think like, okay, nothing's really pure in samsara? Is it, is it going to help me to think of selflessness? So we need to have a lot of different antidotes in our mind. And the more powerful we make these times when we're not emotionally out of control, the more apt we are to, slow down emotionally out of control, or not allow it to even, it starts to rise up, and we can firmly face, as it says in Geshe Langritamba's 8 verses for training the mind, whenever a disturbing emotion arises, endangering myself and others, may I quickly face and avert it. Arises. It's starting to arise at the level of arisal. You see a disturbing emotion arising. Okay, so think about it. Think about you're in a circumstance where that's happening. Think about where you lost control, and think about if you had a better way of kind of having conscientiousness and introspection and mindfulness, how you could have maybe utilized some things if you had remained like a piece of wood, to been able to have a better time with whatever went on. So, these are the stakes that we're talking about. We want to be happy. We don't want to suffer. And we don't, it's great. I can become an arhat and never suffer again. It's great. I can become a Buddha and have no suffering ever again and have the highest amount of happiness. But the byproduct of working at those greater goals will be more peace in this life, more rational decisions in this life, and more of an ability to be able to handle life's difficulties than we would be able to do if we didn't have these precious teachings. But if we don't use them in a daily basis, if we don't meditate, if we don't go through the stages of the path on a daily basis in our mind and look at what those are and how we're evolving, and look at the mirror of the Dharma and look at our face and see where the dirty marks are. If we're not doing that on a daily basis, we'll just walk around with a dirty face the rest of our life, and we'll talk about the Dharma, and we'll talk about, having, a face that's perfectly washed, but everybody will see that it's really dirty. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I go for refuge until I am enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. And now we'll recite Lama Tsongkhapa's foundation of all good qualities, the source of all my good, which is the roadmap for our enlightenment. If we want to know what do we need to do to become a Buddha, well, Lama Tsongkhapa, luckily, wrote 14 stanzas about it. A beautiful 14 stanza poem that leaves out nothing whatsoever, tells us exactly what we need to do in order to become enlightened. And if we stick around and we study the larger Lamrim texts and we get enough teachings, we'll be able to see those 14 stanzas and recognize that every single thing about the Buddhist path that we need to know is contained within those 14 stanzas. So now I just need to find those 14 stanzas, and we can we could just get fired up here about it. All right. Okay, so the source of all my good by Lama Tsongkhapa. And here, as we recite these verses, try to have it impact your mind. Try to think about it in saying that, like, Lama Tsongkhapa, what an amazing being. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, what an amazing being. May I realize from the place that I'm sitting at, each time you read each of these stanzas, say to yourself, may I realize this right now. As quickly as possible, may this be the way that my mind works. As you read these, let these sink in and feel them. Recognize that I need a teacher so badly. The source of all my good is a qualified teacher. Please bless me to get this. Please, please make me know this from this seat that I'm sitting in. May I please know this? Like mind, hello mind. I'm talking to myself. Please, please, get it together. Stop being such an idiot. Oh, mind that's been in control of me that I've never been in control of. Well, guess what? I'm taking control of my mind today. And I'm going to decide that from this sitting place, the source of all my good is the teacher. I'm going to take the essence of this life. I'm going to do so by practicing the small, medium, and great scope. And then in the great scope, once I've practiced all of these foundational things, I'm going to practice Tantrayana, and I am going to do this in order to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings and get out of my lack of reliability as quickly as possible. So think about each of these stanzas, because becoming free from suffering and getting out of the lack of reliability and your getting out of unhappy states is contingent on realizing each and every one of these stages in the order that they're presented in order for the latter realizations to take place. We must realize the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity to have a foundation for the teachings shared in common with beings of medium capacity. We must realize the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity to have a realization of the teachings for beings of great capacity. So we see this is our roadmap of realization. And if we're honest with ourselves, we can, as I said, use this as a mirror to see if our minds are in line with the Dharma or not. The source of all my good. It's called the foundation of all good qualities, or the source of all my good, Yunten Shijurma. It's just a different way to translate it. And I like the poetry of this particular translation. The source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that taking myself to him in the proper way is the very root of the path, and grant me then to serve and follow him with all my strength and reverence. Bless me first to realize that the excellent life I've leisure I found just this once is ever so hard to find and ever so valuable. grant me then to wish and never stop to wish that I could take its essence night and day. My body and the life in it are fleeting as the bubbles in the sea froth of a wave. Bless me first thus to recall the death that will destroy me soon, and help me find sure knowledge that after I have died, the things I've done, the white or black, and what those deeds will bring to me, follow closely behind, as certain as my shadow. Grant me then ever to be careful to stop the slightest wrongs of the many wrongs we do, and try to carry out instead each and every good of the many that we may. Bless me to receive all that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. I can never get enough of them. They cannot be trusted. They are the door to every pain I have. Grant me then to strive instead for the happiness of freedom. Grant that these pure thoughts may lead me to be watchful and to recall what I should be doing, and grant me to give the greatest care to make the pradamoksha vows, the vows of morality, the essence of my practice. They are the root of Buddha's teachings. I have slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. Bless me to see that every living being, everyone my own mother, has fallen into. Grant me then to practice the wish for enlightenment, to take on myself the task of freeing them all. Bless me to see clearly that the wish itself is not enough, for if I'm not well trained in the three moralities, I cannot become a Buddha. Grant me then a fierce resolve to master the Bodhisattva vows. Grant that I may quickly gain the path where quietude and insight join together, one which quiets my mind from being distracted to wrong objects, the other which analyzes the perfect meaning in the correct way. Grant that once I practice well the path shared and become a vessel that is worthy, I enter with perfect ease the way of the diamond, highest of all ways, holiest door, to come inside for the fortunate and good. Bless me to know with genuine certainty that when I've entered thus, the cause that gives me both the high attainments is to keep my pledges and my vows most pure. Grant me then to keep them even at the cost of my life. Bless me next to realize as well as I can the crucial points of both the steps, the essence of the secret ways. Grant me then to practice as the holy ones have spoken, putting all my effort in and never leaving off the practice of the 4 times highest that there is. Bless me, grant me that the spiritual friend who shows me this good road and all my true companions in this quest live long and fruitful lives. Bless and grant me that the rain of obstacles, things within me or outside me that could stop me now, stop and end forever. In all my lives, may I never live apart from my perfect lamas. May I bask in the glory of the Dharma. May I fulfill perfectly every good quality of every level and path, and reach then quickly the place where I become myself, the one who holds the diamond. It says, where I become Vajradhara myself. So this is our goal. We aren't, just relying on all these holy beings like they're gods. No, we're saying, I'm going to become a Buddha. I'm going to become Vajradhara by relying upon these stages of the path. Okay, so we've been talking about bodhicitta, the mind that aspires to enlightenment. And we've been on this stanza for a long time. I have slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. Bless me to see that every living being, everyone my own mother, has fallen into. Grant me then to practice the wish for enlightenment, to take on myself the task of freeing them all, the task of freeing everyone. And this is a tall order when we look at our biased attitude that we have to try to get rid of through these beautiful practices that we've been talking about, through equanimity, recognizing sentient beings as our mother, remembering their kindness, wishing to repay their kindness, and then love through the force of attraction. Those foundational steps of the pre-step of equanimity and the first 3 steps that allow us to set a foundation Hold on one second. I have to prove I'm not a robot. Set a foundation that will help us to have a mind that's intent on others' welfare, that will get us to the ultimate mind intent on others' welfare, which is bodhicitta. So we've been reading about great compassion having as the object sentient beings who are suffering among the 3 types of suffering. So if you're in cyclic existence, you have among the 3 types of suffering. You have minimally the pervasive compounded suffering. And we can talk about all of that. Pervasive conditioned suffering. We can talk about all of that and have talked about that at other times. And at a later date, we could talk more about it. And the subjective aspect is thinking how nice it would be if sentient beings were free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. I will cause them. I want to be a cause for them to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, may the Buddhas please, bless me in some way to be able to do this. So this is the kind of attitude we're trying to cultivate towards everyone without bias, wanting them to be free from suffering, the causes of suffering, and then wanting to be a cause in some way for that occurrence in general way. We're setting it up for this extraordinary attitude, which will come next, of altruism. So we left off here. So even a bodhisattva who is at the start of 3 countless eons of practice must develop such a spirit of enlightenment. So we found out that the actual measure of the spirit of enlightenment, how we know if one has the spirit of enlightenment, we would say that you've committed to guide all living beings. You've committed to becoming a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And you would spontaneously feel that when you see a being who's bereft of happiness. And you would immediately see them as a being you must become a Buddha for. Because you want to be able to remove their suffering and make them have happiness. So you would have this, and it's it's something that isn't like that goes on later on. It means that day and night you're seeking to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, and everything that's occurring is making you more and more want to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. There's not a discouragement. There's actual, when people are difficult with you, it fires you up to do more to become a Buddha for them. So suppose that you're not anywhere near these objectives, that you give rise to the mere thought. So just think, like, a lot of times people will say, oh, I was meditating and I had this thought, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And so you have this little thought, I will attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. And in order to do this, I will cultivate this virtue. You may make this great error of entertaining the false conceit that I have attained it with regard to something you have not attained. So we have to know what the measurement of it is that day and night you're thinking about nothing else but becoming a Buddha. Why? For the benefit of others. Again, when we talked about, the goal and then the reason for the goal, becoming a Buddha for everyone. So day and night, your mind wouldn't work. It's a main mind. Your mind wouldn't do other stuff other than, what do I have to do to reach this goal? So it says that you can fool yourself and you should not have false conceit. If you then hold that the spirit of enlightenment is the core personal instruction, yet instead of training in it, you search for something else and work on that, then you are only making a claim to have passed through many of the levels of attainment. So we see that there's a number of levels that we have to go through in order, when we look at the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacities, teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity, we have in there renunciation already. We have these practices that must serve as foundations. And when we look at the precepts to get into the great vehicle of bodhicitta, we have the 7-point cause and effect and equalizing and exchanging self with others. So there's tons of practicing that we have to do. And if we think that we've already achieved bodhicitta and it's just so simple because we don't know what bodhicitta is, we're going to overlook everything that we need to do to actually get bodhicitta and maybe start practicing tantra or something because we think we're super fancy. So if those who know the key points of the Mahayana see you doing this, they will ridicule you. Many books say that the excellent conqueror's children train in the spirit of enlightenment for many eons, holding it as their most important practice. So what need is there to mention that it could not be attained by those who have nothing more than a superficial understanding? This is not to say it's unsuitable to meditate on other paths, but it is to say you must hold the training of the spirit of enlightenment as the core instruction and then sustain it in meditation. So Lama Tsongkhapa is not saying, like, don't do anything else and don't leave imprints of other things. And as Rinpoche said, if you can get, it's amazing blessing if you can get an initiation, but you have to know what that means, that you're just getting like an imprint so that later when you actually have realizations to practice Tantra, you'll have a connection to it. We can do it in a contrived way. But if we focus so much on that and think we're getting somewhere without knowing that in order to get anywhere in Tantrayana, we have to have the wisdom of emptiness and we have to have bodhicitta. If we think that we've got something that we don't, we can move forward to somewhere we can't go and then fool ourselves and get nowhere. And I've seen this over and over and over again in the 30 years that I've been practicing, and I've done it myself and seen that it doesn't work. So I did the work for you. I tried to do stuff that I wasn't ready to do, the first couple of years when I was practicing, and fell on my face and it didn't work. And I would have gotten a lot further forward if I had just concentrated on the things that were the preliminary practices that were the things that were going to be necessary at my level. And I deceived myself, and because of my conceit, because of my arrogance, and thought that I was at a place that I wasn't in the earlier days. And I'm so grateful to have qualified teachers to say, hey, do you know what the small scope is? Do you know what the medium scope is? Do you have these realizations? And you can, but if you don't, you don't have bodhicitta. This is not to say it's unsuitable. Okay, so there are those who, even without having gained the experiences as explained above, know about the Mahayana trainings and have firm conviction in the Mahayana. They first develop the spirit of enlightenment and take the vow through the ritual, and then train in the spirit of enlightenment. For instance, in engaging in the bodhisattva deeds, first there is a description of adopting the spirit of enlightenment and taking the vow, and then a detailed explanation of how to practice the spirit of enlightenment. So we'll end here, but we know he's talking about Acharya Bodhisattva Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. We know that there's 10 chapters in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. The benefits of the awakening mind, or the benefits of bodhicitta, is chapter 1. Chapter 2 is dealing with disclosure of evil or confession of downfalls. In that we find the 7-limb prayer also, and so forth in there. And then chapter 3, so that's chapter 2, disclosure of evil. Chapter 3 is the full acceptance of the awakening mind. And then chapter 4 deals with conscientiousness, and chapter 5 deals with introspection, and then chapter 6 deals with patience, and then chapter 7 deals with joyous effort, chapter 8 deals with concentration, chapter 9 deals with wisdom, and then chapter 10 is a dedication. And the beautiful teaching from Zapatra Rinpoche's lineage, passed down to Kuna Lama Rinpoche, to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. We know that Kuna Lama Rinpoche was His Holiness the Dalai Lama's bodhicitta teacher, and Kuna Lama Rinpoche's teacher was Zapatra Rinpoche. Zapatra Rinpoche is who wrote the words of my perfect teacher. And we know that in that lineage, you know, that very famous line that says, may the supreme jewel bodhicitta, that has not arisen, arise and grow, and may that which has not diminish, but increase forevermore. That one stanza summarizes Master Shantideva's guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life. How does it summarize it? It summarizes it, may the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen, arise and grow. So this is the first 3 chapters of the Bodhicharya Avatara, the chapter on the benefits of bodhicitta, the chapter on disclosure of evil, and the chapters on the full acceptance of the awakening mind. So this is, may the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen, arise and grow, and may that which hasn't risen not diminish. Not diminishing it is dealt with in the chapter of conscientiousness, introspection, and patience, not letting your bodhicitta diminish. And then it says, not diminish, arise and grow. And so Zapatra Rinpoche says that the last 3, the arise and grow, is the way you make it arise and grow is by engaging in joyous effort, concentration, and wisdom. And then the explanation is that the 10th chapter dedicates the virtue from the bodhicitta that has not arisen, arising and growing, and dedicating the virtue from not diminishing, and dedicating the virtue for it increasing. So this is how Zapatra Rinpoche explains it. And we know that the Master Shantideva teaches the 6 perfections, goes over, the benefits of bodhicitta, and then gets into the bodhisattva vows, and then gets into the actual 6 perfections. Generosity, there's not a separate chapter for it because it's dealt with throughout the book, but we see that the perfection of ethics is dealt with under the details of conscientiousness and introspection. And then we find the perfection of patience. It goes then forward, the patience chapter, the joyous effort chapter, the concentration chapter, and then the wisdom chapter. The 6 perfections are contained in there too. All right, that's enough information out of me. Thank you so much for your patient listening. We'll get into some more stuff that I wanted to go over from the Lord Maitreya's Abhisamalankara, and the 22 levels of bodhicitta gets mentioned, just to give you a little taste of what we'll get into next week. And yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to do this each week and talk about these details. And really gauge in my own practice, where was I at last week? What was I doing? What was I talking about? What was I thinking about when I'm preparing for class? And thinking about how did I apply these practices in my own life, and have they had any effect? And, I really, really appreciate the opportunity to do this. So the concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I've collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Any mistakes that I've made, I apologize. I don't know that I've made any, but I may have. I am not perfect. I'm not a Buddha. And I walk in very large shoes because I was asked to teach by a Buddha, Namgyal Khensur Geshe Wangdak Rinpoche. So any mistakes that I've made, I apologize, and may they be purified by the Vajrasattva mantra. Om Benza Sato Samayam Minabalaya Benza Sato Zina Vajita. Dear me, was the guy may was the guy may want to me was I was any may branches of a comes into making him shoe and kurum ha Bagamanza without the Gata Benza Mami Moka Benza Baba Ma Samaya Saba Ah Home Fate. May we always be protected by Paul and Lama Jorama 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 Tujikala Rachimo Rama Wacha Dacha Tunjo Rilla Hong Jo Om. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors to traverse the three times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase forevermore. In all my lives, may I never live apart from my perfect lamas. May I bask in the glory of the Dharma. May I fulfill perfectly every good quality of every level and path, and reach then quickly the place where I become myself the one who holds the diamond. In the heavenly realm of Tibet, surrounded by a chain of snow mountains, you are the source of all benefit and help for beings, all-powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso. Please remain until samsara's end. Don't forget, if you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. And if there is grasping, you do not have the view, according to Sachen Kongan Nimpo. Remember this throughout your week, and remember the blessings that we have from His Holiness to be able to remember this throughout our week, the blessings we have from our root lamas to remember this throughout the week. And now I'll make a supplication to Namgyal Khensur Geshe Wangdak Rinpoche, who stays in my mind, at my heart, is always with me. If he ever left, I feel like I'd lose weight. And always reminding me from all the teachings he gave me in my ear to not be satisfied with partial instructions, and not be attached to this life, and not be attached to samsara, and try to get out of my own self-interest, and try to figure out how to not grasp at things. This is the blessing and the generosity of Dharma that he gave me. A complex yogi poses as a simple monk. Homage to Khensur Geshe Wangdak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible, to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music purified by Om Ah Om, Om Ah Om, Om Ah Om. The rarity of having 1,000,000 wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you, who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Atisha, who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond, and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. The teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of three capacities. Now that sound has stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that your teachers passed away, understood this sadness, and treated us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It is by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. Sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to our world and take care of us in all of our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts in crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. I saw who he really was. And many of you saw who Khensur Geshe Wangdak really was. Yeah, we're so fortunate. Have a wonderful week, everybody. Take care. Thanks for listening.